Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Café. Delighted that you're all joining us today. I'm Ellen from Bantony, and today we're going to be, first of all, having a little bit of an opportunity to say hello to each other. And then we'll go into a session with Hazel, which will be, I think, interactive, exploring assessment. I think we always get feedback that assessment of entrepreneurial learning is a tough one, people. It's not straightforward, and for many it can be quite new. It can open up new avenues of activities, new ways of thinking, as well as being an opportunity to really share and learn from each other about what works. So we've got lots of people with us today. If you want to put in the chat where you're from, who you are, where you're from, please do. Great to hear you, and we'll try and just do a bit of a shout out to everybody. But without further ado, the first thing today is you're going to go straight into a breakout room, and the only purpose of the breakout room is to put faces to names, to meet your participants on the entrecompedu course. Some of you're all at different stages of the course, so just say hello, introduce yourselves, so that we just get to know a little bit more and get a bit of a community going. 1 second while I admit everybody that's coming in. In the chat, say where you're from, where you're calling from now, and if you want to put your organisation down, that would be great. So we've got Anna from Tirana. Hi, Anna. Hi, Sue from South Wales. Hi, Vizam. Great to see you again. Got Mats from Sweden. Hi, Mats. Radmil from Macedonia. Maya's coming in from Finland. Stacey's coming in from Canada. Natasha from Macedonia as well. There's lots of people here today. Really pleased to have you here. And today we are talking about assessment. And I'm delighted to have Hazel Israel, one of our trainers on entrecompedu, with us, who's going to take us through a little bit of an exploration around assessment for entrepreneurial learning. So without further ado, Hazel, I'll hand over to you to start our session today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Okay, so I suppose I'd better start by introducing myself. First and foremost, I'm a learner, but also I was a teacher, trained initially for primary, but ended up working in post-compulsory, post-16 further education, working in adult and community learning, work-based learning and HE for over 20 years. So I did a lot of assessment, and it was mostly assessment of skills. So I took many roles in assessment, internal quality assurer, external quality assurer, examination, team leader, writing papers, and eventually went into Welsh Government to lead reform of qualifications, policy and practice in Wales for the skills qualifications and the Welsh Baccalaureate. I worked for a number of years with the regulator for qualifications in Wales and have a keen interest in the potential of digital assessment, having spent 5 years as rolling chair of a UK 4-nation research and development group for e-assessment. So the reason I'm telling you all this is to qualify me a bit in terms of assessment and to give you a sense of where my thinking about assessment comes from. And it's, but I'm much more interested in the practice of assessment literacy, if you like. So when I say that I'm a learner, I'm thrilled to be working with Bantony and University of Wales, Trinity St David's and other partners on this project to learn more about assessment. So you've introduced yourself, so I can skip over that bit. So our topic for today then is assessment, and what an exciting time to be talking about assessment. So much of what we all took for granted is now changing. You know, systems we have had in place for decades are melting away, and I'm very excited because so much more is now possible, I believe. So I have to be honest with you and say that I have been agonizing over this session a bit. Assessment in 30 minutes is quite a challenge. What will you want to know? How can I make it engaging? I have been blown away by all your practice examples and ideas in LoopMe. For those of you participating on the course, what amazing ideas and practice you've been sharing. And I am very much learning from you. So I decided that there wasn't really much I could usefully teach you in 30 minutes. So what I'm aiming for in this session is for us to do some thinking together and to share some really interesting examples of assessment projects from around the world, which you can take away and learn more about beyond this session. Hopefully, these examples will inspire you to try something new or something that you usually do in a new way, slightly differently. The slide with all the terminology on is to illustrate the fact that one of the things that makes it tricky for us to discuss assessment in broad generic terms is its language. It has a language of its own and a proliferation of terminology which changes according to purpose and according to context. I mean, a simple one, for example, we would talk about entrepreneurial assessment, but is entrepreneurial assessment the same thing as the assessment of entrepreneurial competences? Don't worry, I'm not expecting you to answer that question. Okay, so my first question then, in the name of learning from you and hoping to better meet your needs, not necessarily all in this one session, what do you want to know about assessment? What do you need to know? Please, everybody, type one question into the chat. If this was a Q&A and I was an expert, what would you want to ask me about assessment that would be useful to you in the entrepreneurial learning context? So one question each, please, in chat. Great questions, lovely, thank you, that's great. And we're going to collect these questions and use them to develop future workshops and learning events for us together. This is great. How to measure the level of development of entrepreneurial competences among students. How do you make sure your assessments are assessing that progress? Excellent, some really good questions here, thank you. Yes. How do you prioritize the kind of assessments and their frequencies? That's right. Really great. Thank you, everybody, for those questions. So my question then, really, as a learner and a researcher, my big and thorny question is this: what is the best way to assess Entrecomp? And I'm sure that there isn't just one way, and I suspect that the better question is, what are the best ways to assess Entrecomp? But it's a complex question with many, many answers. And if I was going to be honest, I would have to say that I don't know. Planning to find out, hopefully all together with you. And one of our goals in developing the EntreAssess tool in Module 4 of the Entrecomp Edu program is to encourage participants to experiment and explore assessment, to try different approaches and to take different roles in the assessment process, for learners to be examiners, for learners to set tasks and develop marking criteria and mark schemes, and to explore how much of the assessment the learners can actually do for themselves. Because in entrepreneurial education, we are talking about agency, creativity, self-efficacy, and none of those attributes or competences involve waiting around to be told by someone else how you are doing. My favorite assessment analogy of the moment is around summative assessment, is pilots flying a 3,000-mile journey, and instead of monitoring and adjusting the flight path along the way, tweaking the instruments, sort of adjusting the course along the way, waiting to have traveled the 3,000 miles, arriving in the wrong place. And it's too late then. And for many of our students in school who have to wait until the end of school to sit exams, that's the point at which there is this judgment on their ability. Surely we should be helping them along the way in a much more formative way. I'm sure as educators, you have met many learners who have arrived in the wrong place after a period of learning. So the two things I do want to share with you today, the two sort of concepts that I'm obsessed with, certainly passionate about at the moment. The first one is assessment as learning. So assessment as learning is the ongoing assessment by students in order to monitor their own learning, which is characterized by students reflecting on their own learning and making adjustments so that they achieve deeper understanding. So assessment as learning is part of assessment for learning, formative assessment, if you like. But there is such rich learning available to students when they take the roles of examiners themselves, when they take on all the different aspects of the assessment process. Assessment should add value to learning. It should be another learning opportunity, adding value to a learner's agency and confidence. The second concept I want to tell you about today is assessment literacy. So assessment literacy is defined as the knowledge how to assess what students know and can do and interpret the results of these assessments to apply these results to improve student learning and program effectiveness. It's the practice of assessing. So assessment literacy for everyone is not just an essential skill for examiners and teachers, but most of all, I would argue, for learners themselves. My dream, my goal in an assessment situation is learners being able to make decisions about how best to evidence and present their own and others' learning and progress, cutting out the middlemen, if you like. Why do they need awarding bodies necessarily, or someone else to tell them? Let's unleash their own competence around making judgments about their own performances. So, in the name of sort of developing your own assessment literacy a little bit, not knowing very much about where you are on that journey yourselves, I thought the best thing I could do in this session is to share some really relevant, exciting and innovative examples of assessment from around the world for you to consider and review in terms of what value these approaches might add to the assessment of entrepreneurial competence, okay? So assessment across the world, there are a number of issues being experienced, sort of commonly experienced by a number of different countries. So across the world, schools, districts, countries and consortia all are rethinking assessment, not least because of the COVID pandemic nightmare. There's a growing sense that most public exams, especially in secondary education, don't examine the right things. The wider capabilities and dispositions wanted by employers, such as creativity and collaborative problem solving, are largely absent. Important aspects of the development of character are missing, and important aspects of practical and applied learning are almost entirely overlooked. So in Bantony, we have been working with a group called Rethinking Assessment, and they're working on developing and testing options for national assessment systems other than the high stakes exams we have at the moment. The pandemic and collapse of in-person huge cohort sitting in the hall exams is an unprecedented opportunity to revisit assessment and think again more creatively about how we assess and what we are assessing for. Who are we assessing for? As a part of this work, this group has been horizon scanning for innovative but realistic alternatives, and they've pulled together about 30 really interesting examples being used across the world. So for the purposes of the Café today, we haven't got much time. I've picked 10 of them for you to consider in breakout groups. So we're going to put you into breakout groups. We're going to share a handout with you, and on that handout will be 10 examples from the 24 collated by the Rethinking Assessment group. And what we'd like you to do in these breakout groups is to discuss and agree which 3 of the 10 you think would be would add value to the assessment of entrepreneurial learning. I want you to pick your top 3 favourites. And then when we come out of the breakout groups, I'm going to ask you to share those favourites, but give one reason for selecting each. So, for example, we've chosen this one because, we've chosen this one because. So be able to justify your selection. So, okay then, admit it, somebody in the waiting asked, I think somebody's dropped out, just let them back in. So everybody back? Great, thank you very much. So I hope you had the opportunity to review certainly a small number of those examples, and I'm hoping that you'll take the opportunity to check out the website, because it's a really useful collection of examples from literally across the whole world, and they're very, very exciting. So in the meantime, what I'm interested in finding out is, in each of your groups, which of the approaches were your favorite then, and why did you think that they might be useful? Who wants to
Yeah, I can go ahead. I can go ahead. But in our case, we didn't even come to a conclusion, to come to a decision, which 3 that we're going to choose. But so that, because we ran out of time, but I think I can leave it to Pamela and Oliver, that they can explain which one they have chosen. So I think that's the only few that we have. And also at the end, I can go ahead with the one that I think is Oliver spoke about number 3, and Pamela talk about number 10, and then I will give the reason why I think number 8 is something that can add value to entrepreneurial learning.
Great. We need to do it quite short.
So Oliver,
to be aware of time. Yeah, quite brief. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, I was proposing number 3, the portfolio, because I have already come across the concept of e-portfolios for documenting individually skills, achievements of students in a digital individual e-portfolio. This then can be later used for further education as well. So it is an individual documentation, what kind of of achievements are assessed and approved by external persons.
Great, thank you.
Pamela, to you now.
Yes, very quickly. I vote for 10 skills builder framework, because it's a framework we can use in the form standardizing in the different schools, and say the skill that the employers are looking for, and this is the company need in this moment, and it is the way for assessment the entrepreneurial competence for the employee. Yes.
Yeah, great, lovely, thank you, good.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and then we discussed about number 8, which I find that it was is something that will add value, because I always in my teaching I always use number most of the time as the lecture for creativity and innovation. So I think experiential learning is really important. So that I prefer to use case studies and real projects or other dissertation, and then students we develop the learning through that, and then they can be assessed. So they have to practice how to do that, you know. So experience learning. So hands-on experience.
Great, lovely.
So that's sort of practical learning. So that's what I want to say. Yes.
Thank you. And another group?
Shall I talk about our group, guys?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Hazel.
Hi.
Hi. We looked at them, and we all chose our own separate one. I've chosen number 10, which is the Skill Builder Framework. because I've actually been looking at that, spent quite a lot of time looking at that, and we like the approach because it's bringing in partners, business partners, and it's actually a little bit like badges, I suppose, which was one of the other ones, and it's quite detailed, and it helps as well because on the website it actually has all the framework there for you as well. So I chose that one, so that was mine.
Great, lovely, thanks.
And one of the other girls chose number 2. Do you want to talk about that? Don't know where she's gone.
Some people have sent apologies in the chat saying they've had to leave early.
Okay.
Well, it's not early, it's on time actually, but thank you, Sue, thanks. Anybody else got a different favourite?
Yes. We have, my group have selected the 3 which were 4, 9 and 10, but basically the most favorite one was number 4, which is the IB learning profile. And you know, this one in particular, I was engaged for a long time in evaluating students. One of the most important things that we like in IB learner profile is the open-mindedness in students, which enforces their ability to determine the value and appreciate the value, to determine the value that can be offered in an educational setting, and appreciate their own value that they can offer among creativity and innovation as well. And these 3 issues in particular are competences in Entrecomp.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, great, thank you. Any other top favourites?
Okay, maybe I can continue. Well, in our group, we didn't have time to explore all of them and to read it because personally, I knew few of them, not all of them. And this is what the other group members mentioned. So they didn't have such information for all of the presented information. But what 2 of us choose digital badges. I personally choose this because I've seen this functioning in youth work, and it's a project called Cities of Learning in Europe. So I saw with young people was functioning quite well, and I think especially in this topic can function. One of the colleagues there selected number 6, Character Labs, but she's not here to explain why. She said it's quite interesting. And personally, but I don't know this quite well, Skills Builders Framework number 10, for me it sounds quite interesting.
Yes, great.
But of course, I need to explore it a bit. So thank you for that information, and I think it was useful.
Great, good, lovely, thank you. Any other groups? Any other groups wanted to share different top choices? I mean, it was a means of introducing you to some, hopefully, that you know, some that you didn't know, haven't come across before, but certainly it's a really good place to start, having them all collected on one page so that you can usefully explore them from there. But we'd be very interested in those of you who would be interested in expressing an interest in lots of interest in assessment labs going forward, because we have a few sort of little experiments, projects, workshops that we would like to share with people that there are no right answers to, testing some tools, testing some different techniques, using different sorts of evidence. So really enriching our learning around assessment and developing our own assessment literacy. So if you are interested, please put that in the chat. Okay. Thank you so much for attending and participating and sharing your views. And I hope that you've got something useful out of it. You know, that you had a chance to think about assessment. You've been discussing a few examples, and hopefully you'll go on to find out more. Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you. Over to you, Ellen.
While you've got a chance here to put your name, you know, just to flag your hand in the chat as to, you know, do you want to get involved in an assessment lab? And this is really an extension of this topic of assessment, because we recognise that there's an opportunity here to work together, to explore it more, understand it more. But perhaps right now you might have a question or two. I know people may have to disappear, and we completely understand that. But if you have got a question for Hazel or for the group, now is the time to pop that in the chat, as well as yes, please, I'm interested in the assessment lab. Any burning issues arisen from this discussion that you've had between yourselves as well as with us?
I have a question. Okay. Hello, Hazel.
Hi. Hi.
Yeah, regarding to the number 7, the comparative judgment, I would like to know, if we have a big class of students, how can we control the timing, or big class, because as I understand, the comparative judgment, the assessment is 2 by 2.
Yes, that's right. The easiest way to do it, the only way I've actually seen it work very efficiently, in the name of efficiency, is with a tool called No More Marking. I'll put a link in the chat, but essentially you upload PDF documents, so they can be images or pieces of writing or assignments, and the tool will present the two. So literally you just pick the best one each time, and then there's an algorithm in the tool that creates a rank order. So you can have as many different assessors working on the same evidence, but no more marking, it's called. I think it's mentioned in the EntreAssess tool, but I'll put well worth a look. But the ranking is interesting because it promotes that critical thinking. And you really have to think, is that one better than that one? And if so, why? And, so for me, the rank order, the final rank order is less interesting than the process of making those little decisions along the way, and deciding the criteria for those judgments. But I'll just put the... because this No More Marking tool, I should be selling it probably, but it's free. You can play with it for free. I mean, you can you can buy accounts, and then you have greater access to things, but you can actually undertake a simple comparative judgment activity on the tool for free with your learners or with other teachers. It's really good. nomoremarking.com it is. Okay, so.
Okay. We've just had a question come through from Oliver. What is the difference between assessment as learning and self-reflection?
Self-reflection isn't always about assessment, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Assessment as learning. I suppose assessment as learning, when I think about that, I would say that self-reflection is a part of assessment as learning, if the focus of the reflection is assessment, if the purpose is assessment, I think. But what excites me about assessment as learning is that opportunity. There are increasing number of projects looking to provide opportunities for learners to be the assessors, to write the exam papers, to develop the quizzes. And by writing exam papers and developing quizzes, learners become really familiar with the content, but also evaluating project briefs, assignment tasks. Learners can be a lot more active in the assessment process. That's what I find particularly exciting about assessment as learning. And there are awarding bodies now run by learners. There's a website in New Zealand called PeerWise, and lots of universities and colleges have signed up to it. And students actually critique exam questions and project briefs, and it's amazing. It's well worth a look.
It's also perhaps something about the focus of the assessment process, isn't it? It's like it's not a right or wrong. It's a sort of, it's like a failing forward or a succeeding forward.
Yes, yes. Yes, lovely, great. Any other questions or comments or suggestions for future topics?
Makuba might have sent you a direct message. Have a check in your chat.
Which innovative assessment do you think is most effective for entrepreneurial learning in HE? I think the most innovative thing about assessment in HE would be letting the learners decide, letting the learners do it for themselves, as opposed to it being done to them by somebody else. I think that would be really innovative.
And to a certain extent as well, on a simpler basis, to learners choosing the parameters of what they're assessed on.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
What you said as well is that, it's a simpler way. It's the transparency of assessment is almost, a basic as well then.
But sorry, isn't that a bit subjective? So when you do the assessment and how you are, how you can understand that it's going everything okay? Is that only subjective, or maybe?
This is where, for me, one of the most important aspects of assessment literacy is the use of evidence. Where's your evidence? Prove it, How do I know? What evidence do I have to make judgments about my competence? Because otherwise, it's a bit like that, isn't it? So a really critical part of assessment literacy is using different sorts of evidence and feedback and different actors in that process. Because yes, I'm very often wrong about what I think I'm good at and what I don't think I'm very good at. Definitely need some evidence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to come to a close there. Thanks ever so much, everybody, for joining us. Again, next week we'll be with Felicity Healy-Benson, who is here today, and she'll be talking about creating value through the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And the following week, we'll be back into assessment territory with Stacey from Canada, who's also here, talking about involving stakeholders in assessment, which is something we often talk about. It'd be really interesting to explore that more. So those are the two next talks coming up. But today, thank you, Hazel, for sharing your expertise and insights. Really nice. And everybody, I hope to see you here next week. Same time, same Zoom link.